next we are doing great for time, so thank you for that. So next we've got AndrewJackson, who's going to speak to us about God, the Logos, the maker of difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, yeah. As you can see, this is more of an ontological, cosmic interpretation of the conference theme, following on from that moral interpretation we've just had. And it's based on some of my recent research into Maximus the Confessor. So have you ever noticed that creation is not a single monolithic entity, nor is it a plurality of identical things, nor even a plurality of individually unique things, but it's a unity with difference, which we can see throughout the world in a number of different things, like what unites organisms based on ancestry, evolutionary ancestry, how you might classify stars, what binds together very different organisms in ecological relationships, and even things like mathematical, geometrical things that are related. My objectives today are to remind ourselves of the ultimate maker of all unity and difference, which is God the Logos, the second person of the Trinity. And to do so through the lens of one Eastern Church father, Maximus the Confessor, and also to contrast his view of unity and difference with three alternatives. And then finally, I want to raise some implications or ask some questions for how we view nature and how we do our science. So who was Maximus? Many of you may know already. He is a 6th, 7th century Byzantine monk and theologian who was martyred for his stance on the so-called monothelite controversy, which was about whether Christ had one will or two wills. But he's also very famous for developing further the idea of the Logos, the word of John's Gospel, chapter 1, into much more detail. What I want to do then is to compare his view, which I'll come to last, with three alternatives. One is Platonism, obviously the followers of Plato, the philosopher. Origenism, the follower of the Eastern Church father Origen of Alexandria. And then thirdly, what I call strong voluntarism, which I'm not tying to any particular theologian, although maybe the closest could be Karl Barth. So first of all, creation according to Platonism. There are three different aspects. So in the divine realm, you have eternal, immutable ideas, archetypes, exemplars, forms, or types. You have a demiurgos, a demiurge or craftsman, and you have pre-existing matter, a bit like clay, unformed. And so what happens is the demiurge takes the matter and molds it according to the archetypes, which are the eternal reality. The implications of this, and this is from Plato's Timaeus myth, the implications are that the world is, the sensible world around us, effectively a very weak shadow or mimic of the intelligible, perfect world. And what really is important, what Plato would say is the really real, are the archetypes, the intelligibles, to which we should ascend through contemplation. Not the particulars, not the evanescence of this sensible bodily world. The second alternative is creation according to Origen of Alexandria and his followers. So Origen thought that there was a whole series of identical beings, souls, with ethereal bodies that were in perfect unity with God. But they got bored, they got satiated, they literally got fed up, and so they fell away. And he uses an interesting interpretation of katabale in Ephesians 1:4. Instead of foundation, he thinks of casting down. And God basically, as a punitive measure and a remedial measure, he embodies all these souls. And he embodies them to the extent to which they've fallen away, so either lightly or heavily. And it's those differences in embodiment that account for all the differences in creation today. The idea is that the world is then a gymnasium to try and train creatures back into restitution, apokatastasis, with the one. So the world is punitive and remedial, and all the differences we see are due to sin, not originally as God intended. Then thirdly, creation according to strong voluntarism, which, as I say, it's a bit of a straw man, this one, but you do see signs of this in modern Protestant thinking. So you have God, and God creates creation as a sheer act of will and power, and creation depends entirely on God, but has nothing in common. So there's a big chasm between God and creation. The implications are arguably then that creation is somewhat arbitrary and adventitious and ad hoc, and good is merely a designation because there's nothing in common with creation and God. It's ungrounded except by God's will and power. Coming to creation according to Maximus, Maximus takes the term logos, which has very rich philosophical heritage, meaning rational principles, definitions, speech, or divine ideas. He sees them being refracted into the logoi, the plural, and those forming the material world, the cosmos. And so this happens in a hierarchical, emanative manner. So the implications are that creation is from nothing, ex nihilo, as regards there's no pre-existing matter. But importantly for Maximus and Eastern Orthodoxy, creation is also ex deo, from God, because all the ideas which are inherent in creation are ultimately from God, since there is nowhere else they can come from. So creation is upheld by the Logos, and most importantly, down to particulars. So it's not just the universals, the ideals that are important, it's all the particulars and accidentals of the world. There's a lot of biblical rooting, in case you were wondering for this. This is often called the prepositional metaphysics in the New Testament. The use of words like through, in, for, describing the role of Christ in cosmic creation. But you can also look at it from the point of view of Aristotelian causes. So for Maximus, God is definitely the efficient cause, so he's the source of power, like the chisel of the sculptor, but he's also the source of the ideas. The ideas don't just get magicked from nowhere. They all come from his own excellences and nobilities. And he's also the final cause, the purpose for which he is creating, to glorify himself, for creatures to enjoy him. But most importantly, he's not the material cause. So God is not kind of budding himself off into creation, like some panentheistic views assert. Implications then for how we view nature. Well, science is often about abstracting laws and general principles from nature. And Christians and theologians can often get excited about the apparent hallmarks of design in nature, such as fine-tuning, convergence, regularity, and even for intelligent design, people, irreducible complexity. But according to Maximus, the logos is not just in the regular, but also in the particular, the quirky, the haphazard, the ephemeral, and the transitional. Questions then that arise for us in the light of this, as scientists, are how deeply do we observe and contemplate particulars? How is God manifest in the differences as well as in the unity? And do we need, as Christians, to re-educate ourselves as to what is beautiful, good, and meaningful? And finally, before we do good science, do we do good natural history? Hundreds of years later, the Jesuit priest and theologian Gerard Manley Hopkins wrote this beautiful poem that many of you may have come across before, Pied Beauty, which was extolling the beauty of particularity. Glory be to God for dapple things, for skies of couple colour as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire coal, chestnut falls, finches' wings, landscape plotted and pieced, fold, fallow and plough, and all trades their gear and tackle and trim. All things counter, original, spare, strange, whatever is fickle, freckled, who knows how, with swift, slow, sweet, sour, a dazzle dim, he fathers forth whose beauty is past change. Praise him. So in conclusion, according to Maximus at least, God the Logos is the efficient, formal and final cause of all difference down to the most small detail. And so Jesus, you might say, is not just the Alpha and the Omega, but he's also all the letters in between. And if you want to read more about my research, I have a book which I don't have the nerve to put on the Faraday shelf because it's so expensive. But you can find it in the library, university library probably. So thank you very much.
Also, excellent timing. We've got time for 4 questions. We'll start over this way this time.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent. Oh, is this on? Yeah, good. Yes, some proper philosophy at last. You mentioned the Timaeus. I'm not that familiar with the Timaeus, but I'm going back to the Republic, which I was thinking coming out of a cave. It's actually a tripart thing, because the prisoners were looking at the shadows of the real earthly things, and the prisoner who got up to the sun and looked at it in the full glory in the forms, then went back and reported it. So you had sort of 2 stages, the demiurge, but I suppose the Kantian thought when we never know the reality of what we're looking at, we just see the outside or appearances. I'm just, so that's an interesting thing. And the imperfections, I'm thinking the second law of thermodynamics, which everything is decaying and entropy is basically increasing in a closed system. And it seems that the whole of nature is set up that way. Now, is this after the fall? Or because God said things are very good, that's not perfect in a sort of Platonic sense. And I have a tension there as a sort of neo-Platonist and the idea of a Judaic thing, which doesn't seem quite as perfect. Is there any answer we can give as Christians on that? Because there's a definite tension between the Greek and the Judaic traditions, and I think science is much more influenced by the Greeks than the Jewish people.
Okay.
With the exception of Einstein, maybe, but... Yeah, sorry, it's a complicated question.
No, that's all right, I understand. Well, Maximus goes beyond Platonism, so I have a slide here. So traditional patristic science tends to not linger at the particular. It wants to ascend through ascetic practice, through theoria physicae, contemplating the natural world, to find the logos, okay? Modern day science on the left goes in both directions. It exercises reductionism to try to find causes and parts. It also goes upwards to find laws that bind things together. But Maximus, in my interpretation of Maximus, he considers all layers of reality imbued with the logos. So you don't have to ascend. You can find the logos in the individual flower rather than trying to imagine the perfect flower, if you can see what I mean, okay? So that means that every aspect of creation, entropy included, accidental mutations, are dignified with God's presence, which is just as well because major ontological speciation events happen from very small, innocuous changes. So if God is not involved in those innocuous changes, he has to kind of catch up later to steer things. Well, yeah, that's a different question. Sorry.
If it's very, very quick.
Similar sort of question. It's not clear to me that everything that is good. I'm thinking of malaria, parasites, guinea worms, lots of different viruses. What would Maximus have said about all that?
Well, Maximus, you have to distinguish in Eastern thought maturation versus things which are not good, that are privated, that are dysfunctional. And so Maximus believes that the whole of creation and the fall happen simultaneously, which is great because that then fits in with there's no chronological mismatch. But he also has a theory of privation similar to Augustine. So he would probably say that things which are apparently evil, suffering, are either due to that cosmic fall or they're work in progress, they're not yet. So it's very, very difficult to separate out which is simply immature and which is as a result of a fall.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll move on to our final speaker. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew, again.